Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. One of the most dangerous times of the year for things to go wrong is winter. Blizzards and other winter storms can make it difficult or impossible to get supplies or assistance if you're having an emergency. Those same storms are also infamous for knocking out power on some of the coldest nights of the year, which can create some really dangerous situations. Then when you combine that with everything going on right now, it's a very good idea to gather supplies now to help you be self-sufficient for as long as you can. And one of the most important things to stockpile for winter is different kinds of fuel. These allow you to do things like power a generator, stay warm, and cook. Gasoline is important to stockpile for a couple of reasons. First, having a few extra gas cans on hand will allow you to keep your vehicle fueled up if gas stations have to shut down for one reason or another. This would allow you to do things like travel if you had a vehicle that could handle those conditions, like some sort of four-wheel drive, or you could even use the vehicle itself as a generator by hooking an inverter up to the battery. Then of course gasoline can also be used to run generators, but try to get ethanol-free gas whenever possible. Ethanol, which is in most of the gas that you buy, is very hard on small engines, especially for equipment that sits for a while in between uses like generators. It can damage things like rubber seals, and it doesn't store as long because it combines with moisture from the air. Then of course it should go without saying that if you don't already have a generator, that would be an excellent item to pick up before temperatures drop. Another fuel that you should stockpile is propane, and that can be used for heating, cooking, and also running generators. Propane is actually my favorite fuel to store because it can be used for so many different things, and it also stores much better than other kinds of fuel. As long as the tank itself is fine, then the propane inside should store indefinitely. The cheapest way to stockpile propane is to buy your own tanks and then fill them up at a propane dealer. Propane exchanges like those at big box stores and gas stations usually have tanks that aren't filled up all the way, so you're not getting the best bang for your buck. The small 1-pound propane bottles are also much more expensive than an equivalent amount of propane in a larger cylinder. And since most appliances that normally use those bottles can be hooked up to larger tanks with an adapter hose, buying larger cylinders makes even more sense. You can also stockpile butane, but I wouldn't store as much of it as I would propane for a couple of reasons. First off, the cans that they're stored in are a little bit flimsy, so they might not hold up well to long-term storage. And then also, it doesn't vaporize at 31 degrees or below, so it could be a challenge to use in lower temperatures. It is, however, a little safer to use indoors than propane. Just be sure to have proper ventilation and store your cans somewhere that they won't get too cold. Another relatively indoor safe fuel that you may want to stockpile is denatured alcohol. That's used in small alcohol stoves like this one, which work really well for boiling small amounts of water or for heating up things like canned soup or chili. If you have oil lamps that you plan on using during a power outage, be sure to have plenty of kerosene or lamp oil for them. As a general rule, kerosene burns brighter, but it has more of an odor, making a better choice for outdoor use. Paraffin lamp oil, on the other hand, has less of an odor, but it isn't as bright, so many people prefer it for indoor use. There's a lot of folks out there that like to use clean heat as an alternative to both of those, and like kerosene, it can also be used in kerosene heaters. The next item that you should store for winter is candles, and in general, jar candles are going to be safer than standalone candles since they'll be harder to knock over. But you can always put standalone candles in something like a jar or on a plate so that they'll be a little bit safer, but I would avoid those tall, skinny candles since they're very easy to just tip over. And while most people think of candles for home use, you can also pick up some emergency candles to keep in places like your car. You can get them in jars, or you could use a candle lantern like this one. Then if you plan on using oil lamps or hurricane lanterns, be sure to pick up some extra wick material. And the cheapest way to do that is to just buy it by the roll. Don't buy the little packages that have just individual little wicks in them. I usually get mine in rolls of like 6 feet. Then if you have other things like propane or white gas lanterns, get some mantles for those. Another thing you should stockpile before this winter is different kinds of batteries. If you don't have some sort of generator, then buying regular alkaline batteries will allow you to get the largest amount for the lowest cost. But if you do have a generator, whether it's traditional gas or solar, then rechargeable batteries are a better option. Although they are more expensive up front, you can reuse them over and over again over a period of several years, so they end up being a lot cheaper in the long run. And that's very beneficial if you're using things like radios or LED lanterns that require those larger D-cell batteries. Then you may also want to pick up 1 or 2 USB battery banks for recharging cell phones, flashlights, and other small devices. And that brings me to the next thing you should stockpile before winter, and that is cheap flashlights. While I wouldn't recommend trying to use a cheapie as your primary EDC light if you can help it, they are excellent for keeping in places like drawers or other areas around your house. Lights like this one for Harbor Freight are good for keeping on toolboxes or on your refrigerator, and these light switch lights are good for keeping in closets. And the purpose of this is to just have lights as many places as possible so you'll always have one when you need it. And then also they're very good to give kids so that you don't have to risk, a 7-year-old messing up one of your better lights. The next thing you should stockpile before winter is cold weather clothing. And a good place to start is for things that take care of your extremities, like gloves, socks, and hats. The best material for these is going to be wool, although there are some pretty good synthetic fabrics available now as well. It's also a good idea to pick up some good base layers. Ones like these will keep you warm and help wick moisture away from your body. Most people already have coats and jackets, but if you can afford it, pick up some insulated pants as well. Those would be handy if you're having to spend some time outside, but if you're just sheltering indoors, then even doing something as simple as doubling up on like some fleece pajama bottoms can help you stay warm. Then along those same lines, another thing you should stockpile is blankets and sleeping bags. When combined with warm clothing, those can actually help you stay warm enough to survive most situations, even if you're not able to heat your home. Wool blankets like this one are an excellent option since they'll stay warm even if they get wet, but even cheaper blankets like these can be acceptable if you're on a budget, and if you use 2 or more, they'll be even warmer. Then also, don't forget to pick up some blankets to keep in your vehicles, because those could be lifesavers if you end up getting stranded during a winter storm. The next thing you should stockpile for winter is water. Extreme low temperatures can cause big problems for municipal water systems, and having water stored inside of your home is the best way that you can prepare for this. Bottled water is an okay option if you don't have anything else and you're short on money, but just understand those are not designed for long-term storage, so you need to rotate through them pretty regularly, and also be sure that you're replenishing your stock as you rotate through it. Portable water containers are a much better option, although picking up several good ones can get pretty expensive. Aquatainers are probably the most cost-effective. They're usually less than 20 bucks if you pick them up locally, and they also include a spigot, which is something that a lot of other containers don't. You usually have to buy it separately. Collapsible water containers are good if you're short on space, since they'll allow you to store some additional water before a storm hits. And while you should definitely have water stored permanently, it's still nice to be able to increase your storage if needed, especially for things like winter storms where there's usually some advance notice. Bathtub bladders like aquapods and water bobs will allow you to store even more water, and you can even use things like 5-gallon buckets to store water for flushing toilets and other household tasks. But if you have larger barrels stored somewhere like in your garage or outside of your home, just be aware that those containers can freeze, so that could prevent you from being able to use the water that you have stored in there, and in the worst case, it could destroy those containers as well. Another important thing to stockpile is food, and for this, try to pick up options that require very little preparation. Weather conditions may make it difficult to cook outside, so your best bet are going to be things that you can eat just straight out of the package, or can be prepared just by heating it or a little bit of water up. Canned goods like soup and chili are safe to eat straight out of the can, but heating them up will make them a lot more enjoyable to eat. This can be done with alcohol stoves or even a candle lantern like this one. Freeze-dry meals are very nice for situations like these, however they are expensive and will require some water to prepare. But I will say that if you're planning on storing freeze-dried meals, and even if you're not, this would be another good time to pick up some additional toilet paper as well. Oatmeal is another good option that doesn't require too much work. It and dark chocolate are also nice since they can help you raise your body temperature. Then other things like jerky and nuts are good to have for snacks. Another thing you should stockpile for winter is hand warmers and foot warmers. While these are not as important as having good quality cold weather clothing, they can help you stay a little bit more comfortable and make the whole ordeal just a little bit less miserable. You can get disposable ones like what most of us have probably used at football games or for hunting, but you can get reusable ones as well. This hand warmer by Zippo runs on lighter fluid just like one of their lighters, and it can run for up to 12 hours without needing to be refilled. And I like these for a few different reasons. First off, they're probably going to be cheaper in the long run and they're less wasteful. And then also, just the hand warmer and a few bottles of lighter fluid is probably going to take up a lot less space than several packages of just disposable hand warmers. The only downside to the Zippo hand warmer is that it only works for your hands and pockets. There's some disposable hot hands out there that are good for keeping in like your boots, and the Zippo warmer is just too large to do that. Another thing you can pick up to help you stay warm is clear plastic sheeting and wide painter's tape. These can be used to seal off leaks around doors and windows, and they'll also help create some sort of like greenhouse effect since that clear plastic will let light in. Then if you don't have one, you could go ahead and pick up a small tent that you could set up in somewhere like your living room to create a microclimate, because smaller enclosures are a lot easier to warm and keep warm than something like a 20 by 20 living room. The next thing you should stockpile before this winter is medications. This is the time of year where people start to come down with colds and flus, and you need to be ready for that. Real Sudafed with pseudoephedrine is about the only thing that works for me when I'm dealing with nasal congestion. Other decongestants like Sudafed PE and a lot of the other stuff, it's virtually worthless. And it's so worthless, in fact, that I think that's probably going to get pulled from shelves soon if it's not already. For chest congestion and coughs, Mucinex or guaifenesin has worked pretty well for me, and if you have a humidifier, be sure to pick up some bottles of distilled water to put in it. Then of course, don't overlook other things like allergy and stomach medications, along with basic first aid items like antiseptics and bandages. Then another thing you should stockpile that a lot of people forget is different kinds of games and activities. Because if we did experience some sort of extended power outage, people are going to get bored very quickly. So having things that you can do as a family and then also individually would be beneficial. Board games are a good way to pass time together, and things like Monopoly and Risk can take several hours to complete. Books are a good way for people to pass time on their own, and that can include things like activity and coloring books for both kids and also adults. Then you should have some hygiene and household items set aside. Wet wipes are handy if you go a few days without running water. You can use them to wipe yourself down, maybe help prevent some skin infections. Then also, sports style water bottles are good to have because you can use them to spray or rinse things. Sanitizing wipes are good for different surfaces since they won't require you to use any of your water storage. Then don't forget other things like toothbrushes and toothpaste for dental hygiene, and if you're a woman or live with any, then some feminine hygiene products. Having a few tarps on hand along with some plywood and fasteners could help you make repairs to your home if it gets damaged. And then also, think of anything that you or your family uses on a regular basis that you would not be able to get if, say, you were snowed in for a week. If you have pets, it could be food for them, so be sure to have plenty of that. If you or a loved one needs prescription medications, be sure you don't get too low on those. And if you do start to get a little bit low and you know a storm is heading your way, then you or them call y'all's doctor and see if maybe they'll let you refill that prescription a little bit early. That might be more acceptable to them than trying to have, like a 6-month or 1-year stockpile of that. And y'all, there's a whole lot of different things that different people could need in that kind of situation. So if there's anything that we haven't talked about, which I'm sure that there is, be sure to leave that in the comments down below because you really might be able to help somebody. And y'all, there's a lot of things that you want to keep in mind when preparing for winter storms. So if y'all want to see ways that you can stay warm during a winter power outage, then click here. Or if you want to see things that you should do if a winter storm is imminent, like it's heading your way, then you can check out that video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.